Married at 19 against her will, she feared the Lycan King, until his wedding gift shocked the town. The bells rang at dawn, not for joy, but for command. Their heavy sound rolled over the stone houses and empty fields, warning everyone that the Lycan King's decree had arrived. Elara stood at the edge of her mother's small home, her fingers cold despite the morning sun. She already knew what the bells meant. Everyone did. The village had been whispering for weeks. The Lycan King needed a bride. Not for love, not for celebration, but for balance. No one spoke his name aloud unless they had to. Some said he was born under a blood moon. Others said he was more beast than man, cursed by ancient magic that ruled the wild lands beyond the mountains. They said his castle was carved from black stone and sorrow. They said queens did not last long beside him. Elara had listened to these stories her entire life. She never thought they would become her fate. The soldiers stopped in the center of the village. Their armor was dark, marked with the symbol of the wolf crown. The captain read the decree in a loud, emotionless voice. By royal order, Elara of Greythorn Village was chosen to become the bride of King Calethorn, ruler of the Lycan realm. There was no question, no refusal. The choice had already been made. Her mother wept quietly. Her father did not meet her eyes. The village elders bowed their heads in relief, not sorrow. The Lycan King's favor meant protection, gold, and freedom from future taxes. Elara understood then. She was the price. That night, she packed nothing but a single dress and a small silver pendant that once belonged to her grandmother. As she stepped onto the king's carriage, she felt as if she were leaving her life behind, sealed away like a memory. The journey to the castle took 3 days. Forests grew darker. The air felt heavier, as if magic watched from the shadows. At night, distant howls echoed through the mountains. Elara slept little, her fear growing with each mile. On the 4th morning, the castle appeared. It stood high above the valley, carved into the black mountain itself. Tall towers rose like silent guards, and banners marked with a wolf crown hung still in the air. The place did not feel cruel. It felt old, as if it had been waiting. The wedding was held the same day she arrived. Elara was dressed in white, though it felt wrong. The fabric was heavy, the crown cold against her head. The great hall was filled with nobles, priests, and warriors, all watching her as she walked toward the throne. And there he stood, King Calethorn. He was taller than any man she had seen, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark royal armor rather than ceremonial robes. His hair was black like the night sky, tied back at his neck. When he turned, his eyes caught the light. Gold. Not warm gold, not gentle. Ancient gold. Elara's breath caught in her chest. She felt small under his gaze, like prey standing before something powerful and unknowable. Yet something was wrong. He did not look at her with hunger. He looked at her with restraint. The ceremony was short. Words were spoken. Vows were read by the priest. Elara repeated them with a shaking voice, her hands cold as stone. Calethorn spoke his vows clearly, without emotion. When the crown was placed upon Elara's head, the room fell silent. She waited for him to touch her, to claim her hand, to seal the bond, but he did not. Instead, he stepped back. A quiet wave of confusion moved through the court. The feast that followed was grand but distant. Music played. Food filled the tables. Yet Elara felt alone among hundreds of people. The king sat beside her but never touched her. He spoke only when necessary. When others addressed him, his voice was calm, controlled, and commanding. When he looked at Elara, it was brief, almost careful. This frightened her more than cruelty would have. That night she was shown to her chambers. They were not a prison. The room was large, warm, and filled with soft light. Books lined the walls. A balcony opened to the stars. Freedom. But freedom without answers felt like another kind of cage. Days passed. Calethorn did not visit her. He did not summon her. No guards watched her steps. She was allowed to walk the gardens, read in the library, and explore the castle halls. The servants treated her with respect, but also pity. Elara began to hear the whispers. They spoke of queens before her, women chosen like her for balance and peace. Some tried to escape, some tried to force the king's favor, some tried to love him out of fear. None remained. No one said how they vanished. Elara started to believe she was waiting for something terrible. Then came the final night of the wedding celebration. The great hall was filled once more. The townspeople of Greythorn Village had been invited to witness the king's generosity. Elara sat beside Calethorn, her heart pounding. She noticed his hands were clenched tightly as if holding back something unseen. When the hall quieted, the Lycan King rose from his throne. His voice carried through the room like thunder held in calm. Tonight, he said, a gift will be given. The villagers leaned forward eagerly. Elara felt a chill run through her body. She feared the gift would be her final chain, proof that she now belonged to him completely. Calethorn turned, not toward her, but toward the people of her village. By my command, he said, every debt owed by Greythorn Village is erased. Every bond of service is broken. No future claim will ever be made upon them. Gasps filled the hall. Elara stood in shock. Then Calethorn spoke again, his voice sharper now. And let it be known, he said, that no one king or commoner has the right to own her will. Not now, not ever. The hall fell into stunned silence. Elara looked at him, her heart racing, her fear shaken by something far more dangerous. Hope. The morning after the wedding gift, Elara could not sleep. The moon had slipped behind thick clouds, and the castle was silent except for the distant howl of wolves in the mountains. She sat by the window, staring out at the dark forest, her mind racing. She had expected fear. She had expected chains. She had expected the cold cruelty of a king who did not care for her life or her heart. But Calethorn's gift had shocked her. Not the gold or the jewels, not even the freedom he gave to her village. It was the meaning behind it. No one had ever stood for her before. No one had given her choice. Her chest tightened. Choice was a dangerous thing. The Lycan King was not known for kindness. His eyes were like molten gold, full of ancient power and hidden storms. She had seen the way the villagers looked at him, with awe, fear, and sometimes hatred. And yet, he had not claimed her. Elara rose from her seat and wrapped her shawl around her shoulders. She had to understand him. She had to know if the freedom he offered her was a trick or something real. The castle was quiet as she walked the halls. The stone walls were cold under her fingers, but the torches burned steadily, casting long shadows. She wandered toward the library, where the books towered like silent guards of forgotten knowledge. It was there that she first felt it, the presence of the king, watching her without being seen. You should not wander alone, a deep voice said behind her. Elara spun around. Calethorn stood at the entrance, his cloak flowing like shadow. Even in silence, his presence was commanding. She swallowed her fear. I'm not afraid, she said quickly, though her voice trembled. He stepped closer, his golden eyes softening for only a moment. You should be careful what you claim, he said. Freedom is not given lightly. It has a price. What price? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he gestured to the shelves around them. Knowledge, he said finally. All of it. The history of the Lycan realm, the curses, the wars, the queens who came before you. You must know what lies ahead if you are to survive. Elara hesitated. The truth could be terrifying. But the need to understand was stronger than her fear. For hours, she read. She learned about the curse that had plagued the Lycan kings for centuries. Each king was born with the wolf blood, a power unmatched, but also a prison. They could not take a bride unless she chose him freely, without fear or obligation. Any attempt to force a union ended in disaster, death, disappearance, or madness. And yet, the story of Calethorn was not one of cruelty alone. He had shown mercy before, but it had cost him. Queens had left, fled, or rebelled, and each time he had suffered. The wolf inside him, the ancient magic, had nearly destroyed him. Alara's heart thumped. This was no ordinary marriage. She was not just a bride, she was a choice. And in a world where choice was rare, the power to choose could change everything. Days passed. The castle remained quiet. Calthorne spoke little, appearing only to give instructions or oversee matters of the court. He watched Alara, but not with desire. His gaze was measured, cautious, almost respectful. Alara began to notice small details. The way he moved through the halls silently, as if the shadows obeyed him. The way the servants obeyed him without fear of punishment. The way his eyes seemed to see more than she revealed. And the way he did not demand her love. It was strange. It was unsettling. It was hopeful. She walked through the gardens one morning, the mist curling around her feet like pale ghosts. Calthorne appeared at the far end of the path, his cloak brushing the grass. "You walk too far," he said, though there was no anger in his voice. "I like the gardens," she said simply. "It is peaceful here." "Peace is rare," he replied. "Even here." She stopped and turned to face him. "Why did you give the gift to my village? Why free them?" "Why me?" Calethorne's eyes met hers. They were fierce but not cruel. "'Cause it was right," he said. "Because fear is not loyalty. Because freedom is more powerful than chains." Alara felt a shiver. His words were simple, but they carried weight she could not measure. Could someone so feared, so powerful, choose mercy without manipulation? Could a king bound by a curse truly act from honor? The question haunted her. That evening, she returned to her chambers to find a small note on her desk. The handwriting was elegant, precise, unfamiliar. "Do not let fear bind your heart. Knowledge and choice will protect you more than walls or swords. K." Alara held the paper close. The signature was just a letter, but she knew who it was from. Calthorne was not like the stories. Not completely. She slept that night with a strange mixture of fear and curiosity. She wondered what it meant to be free in a castle ruled by a king of gold eyes and wolf blood. The next day she explored further, venturing into parts of the castle the servants seldom entered. She found armories filled with weapons that gleamed with silver, halls lined with tapestries depicting battles she could barely understand, and windows that looked out over forests so dark they seemed endless. And then she heard the voices, low whispers chanting in a language she did not know. She followed the sound to a hidden chamber. Inside, a circle of priests in dark robes moved around a glowing sigil on the floor. At the center, Calthorne stood, eyes closed, hands raised. He did not see her. The priests chanted, their voices weaving into a rhythm that made her heart pound. The sigil glowed brighter. Shadows stretched and twisted around the room. Alara realized she had stumbled upon something ancient, something dangerous. She stepped back, her foot catching on a loose stone. The sound echoed. Calthorne opened his eyes instantly. Gold, burning like sunlight through fire. The chanting stopped. The priests froze. "Leave," Calthorne said, his voice low and commanding. "Now." Alara nodded, backing away. Her heart raced, her hands trembling. Later, in her chambers, she could not shake the image of him in the circle, standing alone while the old magic flowed around him. He was more than a king. He was a force older than the mountains, older than the stars. And yet, he had given her choice. She realized that her fear of him had not lessened. It had shifted. It was no longer fear alone. It was curiosity. It was longing. Weeks passed. Alara learned to move through the castle with a careful confidence. She explored. She read. She studied the history of the Lycan realm. And she began to understand the rhythm of Calthorne's life, the way he measured words, the way he held power without cruelty, the way he protected his people with both ferocity and wisdom. But the court did not trust her. Nobles whispered behind closed doors, claiming the bride would bend the king. Priests of old magic warned that a willing heart could break the balance, that love could awaken the curse in ways no one could predict. Alara felt the weight of it, not because she wanted power, not because she wanted status, but because she had become part of something far bigger than herself, a kingdom, a curse, a legacy of wolf blood and ancient magic. And the king, the man she was supposed to fear, stood beside her only in silence, watching, waiting, always measured. One night, the quiet was broken. A messenger arrived with a sealed letter. It was marked with the royal crest, stamped in gold wax. Alara opened it, her hands trembling. Inside was a single line. Soon you will be asked to choose. Choose wisely, or all you have been given will be taken. Alara read the words over and over. Her chest tightened. What could he mean? What choice? She had already been forced into marriage. She had already lost everything she had known. And yet, she realized the truth. This was more than fear. This was more than obedience. She had not yet been asked for her will. Her heart thumped as she looked out at the moonlit forest. The Lycan King had given her freedom. But freedom demanded something far more dangerous than chains ever could: courage. And for the first time in her life, Alara wondered what it might mean to truly stand beside him, not as a frightened girl, but as a queen who had a choice. The castle was quiet, but the shadows moved differently now. Secrets stirred in the halls. Ancient magic breathed beneath the stone floors, and Calethorn's golden eyes seemed to watch her from places she could not see. Winter had come to the Lycan realm, wrapping the mountains and valleys in snow so thick it seemed the world had been swallowed by silence. Inside the castle, the halls were warm, lit by golden torches that flickered against the dark stone. But warmth could not touch every corner, not the corners where fear, doubt, and ancient magic lingered. Alara walked through the hallways with careful steps, her cloak brushing the floor. She had grown used to the castle, its quiet corridors, and the watchful eyes of Calethorn. She had learned to read the signs, the way he moved silently through rooms, the way his shadow stretched longer than it should, the way he watched the servants with both caution and care. She had also begun to understand the man himself, the king whose name alone had once filled her with terror. Calethorn was not cruel, though he could be terrifying when the wolf blood inside him stirred. He was precise, measured, and cautious, but he carried a loneliness so deep it left a hollow in her chest. It was this loneliness that she felt one evening as she stood in the library, watching the snow fall beyond the tall windows. Calethorn appeared without sound, his golden eyes catching the torchlight. "You study too much," he said, his voice low and steady. Alara closed the book in her hands. "Knowledge keeps me alive here," she replied softly. "I need to understand everything." Calethorn stepped closer, his gaze sharp yet gentle. "Knowledge will not protect you from what is coming. Only choice will." Alara felt her heart tighten. "Choice? What choice?" "I am already your bride. I have no say." The king shook his head. "You will have a say, one that matters. Soon, you will be asked to make a decision that can change not only your life, but mine as well. The curse demands it, and it will not wait." Alara's chest tightened. The curse, the one she had only glimpsed in stories and hidden whispers, was more than legend. She could feel its presence, a quiet pulse beneath the castle, like the heartbeat of the mountains themselves. And now she knew she would not escape it. Winter deepened, and with it came the first signs of unrest beyond the castle walls. Scouts returned from the forests, warning that neighboring lords were plotting. They believed the Lycan King weakened because he had shown mercy to her village. They thought the bride would bend the king's will. Alara did not know how much truth there was in their whispers. She did know one thing. She could not stand by while the king faced danger alone. She had no weapons, no experience in battle, but she had courage, and she had choice. One night, under a silver moon, Calethorn summoned her to the training hall. The torches flickered against the stone walls, casting shadows that stretched like claws. "You must learn to defend yourself," he said, handing her a small, weighted blade. "Even a queen cannot survive with the knowledge alone. Strength and will are needed." Elara took the blade, her fingers trembling. She had never held a weapon. She had never fought anyone, let alone a king who was stronger than any man she had ever known. Calethorn stood opposite her, his stance calm but alert. "Do not fear me," he said. "Fear will only weaken your heart. Move with purpose. Move with courage, and when you are ready, you will move with choice." The first attempts were awkward. The blade felt heavy, unsteady, and dangerous in her hands. Calethorn corrected her stance, his hands brushing hers only for a moment, his touch precise and careful. She felt a spark, not of fear, but of something she could not name, something that made her pulse quicken. Days turned into weeks. Under Calethorn's watchful eye, she learned. Her movements became smoother, her confidence stronger, and all the while the king remained patient, never forcing her, never demanding more than she could give. But the curse was stirring. One evening Calethorn's golden eyes flared with an unnatural light. His body tensed, muscles rippling, as if the wolf inside him struggled to break free. Elara froze, the blade still in her hands, unsure of what to do. "You see it now," he said, his voice strained. "The curse will not wait forever. It awakens with power, with choice, with love, and it will demand what it is owed." Elara stepped closer, her fear battling with a strange sense of longing. She had grown to understand him, not just the king, but the man beneath the wolf blood and ancient magic, and she realized something terrifying. She cared.
I don't know if I can," she whispered. "You can," Calethorn said, his voice softer now.
"You must. Not for me, not for the crown, but for yourself. For the life you deserve. Courage will protect you when fear cannot." The snow fell harder outside. The castle seemed quieter than ever, as if holding its breath. And Elara knew she had a choice, one that could save him or destroy everything. The test came sooner than expected. A messenger arrived from the north, blood on his tunic and terror in his eyes. A dark force was approaching, one not of men but of magic older than the mountains themselves. The king's enemies would not wait for seasons to pass. Calethorn prepared for battle. His wolf form shimmered in the torchlight, golden eyes burning with power, the curse pressing against his mind and body. Elara watched him, fear and worry coiling in her chest. "You cannot face this alone," she said, stepping forward. "I do not ask you to," he replied, his voice steady despite the tension in his body. "But you must be ready. The curse awakens when hearts choose freely. And soon, I will need your choice more than your courage." The army marched at dawn. Elara stayed behind in the hall, her mind racing. The choice, the one Calethorn had warned her about, loomed over her like the shadow of the mountains. That evening Calethorn returned. His armor was scorched, and his breath came in sharp gasps. The wolf within him raged, but he had fought with honor, with restraint. He looked at her, golden eyes locking with hers. "Soon," he said, voice low, strained. "You will have to decide. The curse, it will not wait."
Elara reached out, her hand trembling. She did not touch him.
"Not yet. She could not."
But her heart ached with the need to be near him, to offer courage, to share the burden. The night stretched long. Outside, the wind howled like the spirits of the mountains. Inside, the castle held its breath. Elara knew that the moment of choice was coming, and with it, a danger she could not yet see, a power she could not yet understand, and a bond she could not yet name. She fell asleep that night with the blade at her side, and Calethorn's golden eyes burning in her dreams. The first light of dawn revealed a world changed. The air hummed with magic. The castle walls seemed to pulse, and deep beneath the stone floors the curse waited, patient and eternal, for the choice of a willing heart. Dawn broke over the castle like a silver blade, cutting through the night. The snow lay thick upon the mountains, and the wind carried a chill that seemed to reach the very bones. Inside the castle, torches burned brighter than ever, as if the stone walls themselves knew that today would change everything. Elara stood on the balcony, wrapped in a thick cloak, her hands gripping the stone railing. She could see the forest, the valley, and the distant mountains where the enemy forces had gathered, but her thoughts were not on them. Her thoughts were on Kelthorn, the king, the curse, and the choice that had been whispered in her dreams. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Choice was not easy. Fear had once bound her, duty had once trapped her, but now she stood with courage in her heart, understanding for the first time the power of her own will. The door to the balcony opened quietly. Kelthorn stepped out, his golden eyes reflecting the pale light of dawn. He was dressed in armor, black as the winter night, and his presence alone made the air hum with power. But there was something different about him today. The wolf within stirred, restless, powerful, yet controlled. "You are ready," he said, his voice low, steady, and commanding. Elara nodded, her chest tight.
"I think so," she whispered. "I have to be."
"For you, for the kingdom, for myself." Kelthorn studied her, his gaze intense. For a moment, the golden glow of his eyes softened, revealing the man beneath the wolf, the lonely, burdened king who had shown her freedom when no one else would. "The choice comes now," he said. "The curse awakens, and only your will can guide what happens next." Elara swallowed hard. She had learned the history of the curse, the pain it had caused. The queens who had vanished or been destroyed by fear, by deception, or by love taken too soon. She had trained, studied, and grown in the weeks spent within the castle walls. And now, all of it, the knowledge, the courage, the hope, was leading her to this moment. She stepped closer to him, her hands trembling but her eyes steady. "I choose freely," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Not because I am forced, not because I am afraid. I choose because I want to stand with you, to face this together." The air around them shimmered. The castle walls seemed to pulse. A deep, ancient sound vibrated through the stone floors, a sound that was not quite a howl, not quite a roar, but a heartbeat of power, older than the mountains themselves. Kelthorn's golden eyes flared brighter, the wolf within responding to the courage of her will. The curse which had haunted him for generations shifted. The tension that had bound him loosened, flowing outward like the tide retreating from the shore. "You have done what no queen before could," he whispered, awe and relief mixing in his voice. "You have chosen freely." Elara felt warmth spread through her chest. It was not the heat of armor or the fire of magic. It was the warmth of trust, of bond, of hearts meeting without fear. But the world outside the castle did not wait for their peace. A force of shadow had gathered in the valley, drawn by the stirring of ancient magic. The enemy pressed forward, determined to seize the castle while the king was vulnerable. Kelthorn stepped back, placing a hand on the balcony railing. "I will face them," he said, his voice steady. "But this time, I will not be alone." Elara drew her cloak tighter and followed him. She did not carry a sword. She did not carry armor, but she carried choice. She carried courage, and she carried a heart that would stand beside him unbroken. The battle began in the valley below. Shadowed figures moved like wind, their intent dark and heavy. Kelthorn's wolf form shimmered, his power blazing like fire against ice. The ground trembled beneath him. Lara watched from the edge of the balcony as he commanded the magic of the mountains, bending the frost, the stone, and the air itself to defend the castle. She could not fight as he did, but she could act. She called upon the wards and charms she had learned in the library, guiding energy through the castle walls to protect the gates, the towers, and the courtyards. Every spell, every movement was born of her courage and her will. Together, they defended the castle. The wolves in the forest answered Kelthorn's call, joining the battle, howling in unison. Shadowed forces faltered against the unity of king, queen, and forest. As the battle reached its peak, the curse within Kelthorn roared one final time, pushing him toward exhaustion. His strength alone could not hold it back. He turned to Elara, his golden eyes burning with need and trust. "Your choice, now," he said, his voice strained. Elara stepped forward, placing her hand over his. She felt the pulse of magic, the heartbeat of the wolf, and the weight of centuries of kings before him. Her voice rang out, strong and unwavering. I choose you. Freely. Fully. Together, we face whatever comes. The castle trembled. Magic blazed. Light and shadow swirling around them. And then, with a sound like mountains cracking and rivers rushing, the curse shattered. Calethorn gasped, the wolf form receding, leaving the king standing before her, changed but whole, no longer bound by ancient magic that demanded obedience and fear. No longer chained by centuries of sorrow and loss, Elara felt tears fill her eyes. She had not only saved him, she had freed them both. The battle outside fell silent as the remaining forces, sensing the power of choice and courage, fled into the forest. The castle and the kingdom were safe. For now, Calethorn stepped toward her. He reached out, not to command, not to claim, but simply to hold her hand. His golden eyes softened into something warmer, something human. You are more than I ever dreamed, he said, his voice quiet, tender. You are not a queen of fear. You are a queen of choice. Elara smiled, her heart racing. And you are no longer a king of curse. You are the king I can stand beside. He nodded. For the first time, the weight of the crown, the wolf blood, and the curse seemed lighter. And yet he placed the crown upon her head not as a command but as a gesture of honor and partnership. The castle seemed to breathe with them. The snow glistened like diamonds in the morning sun. The wind carried a soft melody of freedom and hope. Weeks passed. Nobles and villagers alike came to see the change. Calethorn's enemies had not returned. The kingdom was cautious, but the bond between king and queen inspired awe. They ruled not by fear, but by strength and wisdom, by courage and choice. Elara learned to walk the halls not as a frightened girl, but as a queen whose will had shaped fate. Calethorn learned to move without restraint, to show kindness without weakness, to lead with trust as well as power. And still, the magic lingered, not as a curse but as a reminder of the bond they had forged, of the choice that had saved them both, of the courage that could shape destiny itself. One evening, Elara stood on the balcony watching the stars twinkle over the mountains. Calethorn came to her side, his hand brushing hers. Do you ever regret it? She asked softly. He shook his head, golden eyes reflecting the moonlight. Never. The curse taught me fear, yes, but you taught me courage. And love is a choice worth every risk. Elara smiled, leaning closer. The snow swirled around them like a blessing. The castle quiet, the mountains eternal. Together they had faced fear, faced choice, and faced the curse. And together they would face whatever the future brought, not as king and pawn, not as predator and prey, but as equals bound by trust, courage, and love. The old magic still whispered beneath the stone, but now it sang a softer song, one of hope and renewal. Elara and Calethorn stood side by side, the kingdom safe, the curse broken, and their hearts free.